So now that you're familiar with the major scale and you know how to do it with your hand signs and you're starting to get the idea of what order they go in and that sort of thing, let's talk about how we read them. I do watch Jacksepticeye. So the musical staff works kind of like a ladder. So as you go up, your pitch goes up. Just like when your hand signs come up and you go in that order of scale degrees, your pitch goes up when you're singing your major scale, and the same thing when you come down. If I tell you that one of these lines or spaces is do, we can then figure out what all of the other lines and spaces are supposed to be. Say that I have decided that this is do. So I have written out a scale here, and I am telling you that this space right here represents do. So the next note above that space is this line right above it. So that would make that re, and we're just going to write their names right next to him. This guy right here is do, and this person right here is re, which would make this mi. Very good. So now I've labeled all of my scale degrees, and as long as we are in the same piece and in the same key, if I've told you that this is do, and of course this is also do because the pattern repeats if you end up going past a scale. If I've decided that this is do, whether it appears here or here. So you can see I've taken the scale away, but I was telling you that same space is still do for this particular song. This space right here is do in this key. Even though I took away the scale and started a little melody line on what? If this is do, what does this start on? Well, let's think through it, right? This space is do. If we go up to the next note, your next note in your scale is re, and then we land on the next note up, which is the next space, which is mi. So this space is do, this line is re, this space is mi. Here's another example. Now we're keeping the same do, so this space is still do. So yay, we've got two do's right here beside each other. Both of those notes are on that space that I told you was do, so those are both do. But what is the next note? That's quite a big jump. We call that a skip. So let's figure out what that skip is. We're going from this space to this space. I'm going to point to the lines and spaces. I'm also going to sign along with it so that I can figure out what the next note is after do. So there's do. I'm going to come up to this line. That line is re. I come up to this space. That space is mi. Up to this line. That line is fa. And then finally we land on the space that note is on, and my hand went completely out of frame, but it's so! Now, the reason that it's important to know your major scale going up and going down is because, of course, notes don't always go up forever. Sometimes notes come down. Sometimes you sing lower pitches than the ones you start on. So notice we have once again started on do. We are still on this space. This space is still do. And the rule about line space being the order that notes go in is the same coming down. But you'll notice we are running out of lines. That's the last line until you get to this whole other staff right here. Don't worry, we're going to talk about that later. So we got do right here, and now, because we're coming down, we have to use our descending major scale, right? So we've got our do right here. This line below it is T, because when you're singing your major scale coming down, T comes after do, right? And then finally, the implied space, even though it looks like it's just a drop off, that's la. Now I have selected a new do. I've decided to move do somewhere else. I have, for your convenience, written you a scale, and I have labeled all of the scale degrees. So now do is a little bit higher. Yes, I did just erase some of my staff. Just don't worry about it. You'll notice do is now a little bit higher, which means everybody else needs to move up higher in kind. But now this high do looks different than all of the other guys. It's got a little line through its head, whereas these guys do not. This is why. So as I'm coming up my scale, I've got my do in this space, so this line becomes re, this space becomes mi, this line becomes fa, this space becomes so, this line becomes la, this space becomes ti. The next thing has to be a line, but there are no more lines. So what you do is you make one. That's called a ledger line. So now, using my new higher do, I have written you a series of notes, and they just jump all over the place. Do you remember what we called that from earlier in this video? Skips, yes, very good. So we've got a series of skips. It starts on do, it's on that second space right there, so it begins on do, and then it comes up to this space. There's a note in between there, right? You got that line right there? So let's figure out what the other notes are. We're going to label them as we go. I've already told you that it begins on do. Do. So if do is this space, this line is re, so we're going up, which means this space is me. All right, so I'm going to put my marker down for a second, and I'm going to sign along with myself. So we're going from this space all the way down to this line, right? So this is me. When we're coming down, we come down from me, next is re, then do. So normally, if we're doing our descending major scale, we stop there, right? So now we have to think in our brains back to the beginning of the descending major scale. So when we start at high do, and then we come down, what do we sing next? T. So that line underneath do is T. The next space then would be la, and I'm running out of camera space. We're going to move it over here, which would make this line so. We'll give so his label. Now, what do you see next? We've got a note up here, but it's on the same space as this note that we have already identified. So let's make use of that knowledge. Because if I've said that this is do, and we haven't changed keys and we haven't changed songs, then this is do forever. Guess what? If I've told you this is me, and we haven't changed keys and we haven't changed songs, this is also me. All right, I'm giving you one more new do, and I've also added a lot of other symbols that you might not recognize. Don't worry about that. You will learn what all of these things mean, and depending on where we are in the school year, you might have already started to learn what some of these symbols mean, but we're going to focus just on these pitches. We're just going to focus on how high or low these notes are and what they sound like to sing them. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that the first one is do. So we know that this line right here is do, so we can use that information to figure out what all the rest of the notes are in this little thing that I've written you. So this line is do, the space above it is going to be re, right? And then if this space is re, the line above it is going to be mi. If this line is mi, then the space right above it is going to be fa. And then finally, that space is fa, then the line above that is going to be so. Just hopped over to the piano to find do. Do. Let's sing this little piece of music together with our hand signs. Do, re, mi, fa, sol. Next few activities are going to focus on reading those solfege scale degrees on some actual staves. Staves, by the way, is the plural version of the word staff, which is what these 5 lines are. Check out my magic trick, y'all. Hey, I erased some of my lines, but not all of them because this board's really old. Okay, have fun.